bottom due to completion of infrastructure projects and workforce numbers reducing dramatically, which will increase rental vacancies and sales. Canberra I never recommend as it's too easily affected by change of governments. Hobart I never recommend as it's easy to buy into and can be very hard to sell out. Adelaide approaching bottom of property cycle, but be cautious as market is lacking confidence due to unemployment rising. Could change if BHP uranium mine at Roxby Downs is activated, and there are rumblings that this will take place, but this will require federal government to export uranium to India and other nuclear-powered nations. Brisbane and southeast Queensland is coming off the bottom of the property cycle. Buy now, but watch units in the inner ring as they are looming as an oversupply in the next year, especially around New Farm and Newstead, Hamilton areas. Okay, so let's move on from property cycles and talk more about that dreaded thing we all must pay, and that's tax. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard this famous old saying that the two things in life you can guarantee are death and taxes. While we certainly can't control when we die, we certainly can, to a degree, control our taxes. But the sad fact is that the majority of the population have no clue as to how this is done effectively. And let me also just say there is no magic taxation rulebook for the rich and one for the middle and lower class. The wealthy just know the taxation laws and how to play the game better, and that's generally due to having specialist advisors, which I alluded to before about having your team of professionals or our advisory network around you. So a quick question. Who pays tax? And I'm hoping you all say yes to that question. And who feels they pay too much tax? And I'm betting you all are saying yes to that one. So then, who would minimize their tax without spending too much time with our mate here behind bars? Now, this is where the combinations I mentioned at the beginning come into play. Who would like to know how to swap your hard-earned tax dollars for high-growth passive cash flow assets? And if you answered no to this question, then I suggest you log off now, because this is not for you. How about this combination? Swapping your income tax for high-growth passive cash flow assets and then combine them to pay off your home mortgage faster, in some cases in as little as 5 to 7 or 9 years, depending on individual circumstances, of course. In other words, we want to play the game of investing using our tax and other available strategies wisely, the same way the wealthy do to win our real-life game of Monopoly, and that's pretty much what it is. Remember, 4 houses equals 1 hotel. Guys, this is where the rubber meets the road. So take some notes as I run through this next section. Let's first look at the family home or principal place of residence. Most people choose to buy and own their own home, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it has no income and 0 tax deductions. So if we put our investor's hat on, in the true meaning of an asset, it's actually a liability, not an asset. But I'm not here to say owning your own home is necessarily a bad thing, especially if we can utilize some equity from it to boost our investment portfolio. With this example, we've got the net wage of the average person. There's the tax component and the super component. Above the line, we've got their principal place of residence. That home has to be paid off out of your take-home wage. You've got no choice in that. And that's why we will cover rapid mortgage reduction principles in a few minutes. What happens when our average person decides to buy an investment property? Most people just pick up a property guide on a Saturday morning and say, okay, let's go and have a look at a few houses. And they check their local suburbs and buy a house around the corner. They're comfortable with that because they feel like they can drive by and see that their lawns are mowed on the weekends and just generally feel a little bit closer to it. And that's about all the planning they put into it. Unfortunately, when they buy that property, they tend to be paying for it mostly out of their net wage. Sure, there's a small portion claimable and used as a tax benefit, but it really squeezes down to their take-home income. They put themselves in a position where the money they've got left over at the end of the week puts a stranglehold on their lifestyle and pulls a handbrake on their ability to do anything else. And it affects their life. It's a great shame that so many people get the wrong perspective on being a property investor when, with the proper advice and planning, it can be a positive, life-changing move into a whole new way of life. Building a property portfolio can give you many important tax advantages, and making good use of those advantages could mean millions of dollars in your retirement fund just by effectively minimizing the tax that you're paying. So it's all about getting the correct structure in place, and yes, we can help you with that. It's a must to get expert advice on what the possibilities are for your particular situation, and then acting on that advice to make your strategy work for you. So what we're aiming for is to have the taxman and your tenants paying for your properties. At the very worst, your portfolio is only costing you pocket change or less per week. Now let's take a little look at how we can maximize income by the tax-efficient use of depreciation. Depreciation is the claim you make each year which enables you to reduce your tax bill. Get it right and you can claim a completely legitimate tax deduction on things like kitchens, carpets, light fittings, range hoods, ceilings, fans, air conditioners, stoves, smoke alarms, the list goes on. But it's basically the things inside the property that are depreciable items. And here's an example of what we call a depreciation schedule, which is done by a quantity surveyor and costs around $600, but it's a vital piece in the whole strategy, which I'll highlight and run through and show you exactly how this is used to lower your tax. As you can see in this example, the estimate for claimable depreciation for this property is around $18,000. It's one of the positive things about our tax system that very few people utilize or understand very well. But the amount of depreciation depends on the type and age of the property you buy. So let's take a look at these examples. Property A is a $350,000 property built in 1982. Presents well, just the sort of place we'd like to live, nice little white picket fence and well-maintained yard. But the legitimate tax benefits from this particular property in the way of depreciation are nil. There is nothing to claim on that one because of the age and certain dynamics. Property B right beside it is another $350,000 property, but built in the year 2000. Looks like a new house, also presents very well, but the depreciation you can currently claim is only $1,625 per year. But the property right beside it, property C, it's brand new. The keys are getting handed over today, and you're in position where you're taking possession of a brand new property with maximum depreciation. The legitimate amount of depreciation benefit on this third property is a massive $18,000, which would make a massive difference to your weekly cash flow. And with how most people who are looking to rent a property in today's society, if they were looking at the house built in 1982, this is what they would see, versus a brand new property with all the latest technology and creature comforts. It goes without saying, and if you were looking through the eyes of your prospective tenants, it's obvious which property you prefer and more than likely pay a premium for. So here's some of the logical, fundamental and appealing reasons why we buy new property in order to ensure the positive property formula works. Less tenant turnover, better management, less maintenance issues, major tax advantages, and of course higher resale appeal if you were to ever choose to sell. Let's now take a look at the mechanics of how to claw back property right beside flow. Property into a positive your I formula works. Less tenant turnover, better management, less maintenance issues, major tax advantages, and of course higher resale appeal if you were to ever choose to sell. Let's now take a look at the mechanics of how to claw back some of our tax dollars using our tax depreciation schedule. But the best part, which some of the most sophisticated investors are not aware of, is how to get that money back on a weekly or fortnightly basis and not wait until the end of the tax year. This is also how we can turn a negatively geared property into a positively geared property, so you have no weekly out-of-pocket expenses. In fact, now actually putting money into your pocket each week. And that is done through what's called an income tax withholding variation, or ITWV. Step 1. Engage a quantity surveyor to complete a depreciation schedule for your property, as we said, for around $600. Step 2, have your accountant complete your ITWV and submit it to the ATO. Step 3, once the ATO has approved your ITWV, you then supply this to your employer and they will now vary or withhold the new amount authorized by the ATO. So the new amount your employer withholds from paying to the ATO, it will now appear in your pay packet. And if you're not 100% sure of this process, that's fine, but we just need to understand that this is done with the help of our expert tax professionals. And it's a relatively simple and easy process, so don't get hung up on it right now if it's a bit confusing. And here's an example of what an ITWV looks like. And you can see highlighted in red the percentage, or what's called your marginal tax rate. And that's the amount the ATO has authorized your employer to withhold from your income and pay directly to the ATO on your behalf. A quick example of how this works is pretty straightforward, but for the visual people, simply put, in this example, if you are on $2,000 a week, your net take-home pay would be approximately